Welcome to the West Energy podcast, powering your career. The energy transition plays a crucial role in Australia and the world's future, and the success of this shift hinges on the people driving it. This podcast will interview a diverse group of energy leaders to provide valuable perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and discussing strategies to manage mental health and wellness in a high-pressure industry. I'm your host, David Smith, the founding partner and director of West Energy and West Recruitment. With over 20 years of recruitment experience and a team that specialises in recruitment across the whole energy supply chain, we're really excited to bring you this series. So, welcome to Powering Your Career with David Smith. I'm David Smith, and very excited to have Anna Collyer from the AEMC, Australian Energy Market Commission, joining me today. Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much, David. It's really fun to be here.
So before we dive in, I wanted to frame up our conversation. Obviously, we've caught up previously and I've given you a bit of the background on the podcast, but there's obviously plenty of podcasts out there that talk about the energy transition and a lot of the technical elements of this one. But this one's a little bit different in terms of it's getting to know the diverse backgrounds and personalities of the people driving the energy transition here in Australia. So over the next hour, we're going to sort of discuss your career journey, leadership, navigating the energy transition, something that's really close to my heart, mental health and wellness. No doubt we'll go into a few other areas. So I suppose ultimately I hope this podcast will inspire people to either join the energy industry or help those already in the energy industry advance their careers. That's the hope. So let's see how we go. So to kick things off, Anna, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to start. Funnily enough, where I always start talking to tell people about my story, I talk about my mum because she's been one of the biggest influences on me growing up and still to this day. So she was an accountant in the 1960s when very few women participated in that career. And she went back to work when I was 5 years old, and I had two younger siblings as well. So all through primary school, I was so proud of her. So, on tuck shop day, like the other girls or kids' mums would be working in the tuck shop, and I would have my little purse with my little 10 cents to buy a Sunny Boy ice block, if any of the listeners remember what that was, because my mum was at work and she sent me off, with a kind of this treat to go to the tuck shop. And then when I was in secondary school, again, this is such a long time, it was before mobile phones. So if I had to call a parent during the day, you'd queue up for the pay phone at the school office, and I'd get on the pay phone and I'd say, "Oh, hello, can I speak to Mrs. Collyer, please?" Which is not because she worked in such a massive office that people didn't know who she was. It was because I was really proud that I had a mum who was working in a professional career in an office. And so, she balanced that with raising three kids. My father was sufficiently enlightened to love having a wife who was at work, but she still did everything at home. Like, we hadn't quite progressed to where we are these days, hopefully. And so that was my normal. Yeah. And, we had just so many diverse experiences because we just had what was in those days a slightly different family setup to what the bulk of my friends had as well. So I was interested in sport. I did athletics, as we were just talking about. I backed for the Hawthorn Footy Club since 1978.
Go the Hawks.
Go the Hawks. I was interested in music, so I learned piano from when I was very young, and that was something that I did throughout my teenage years as well. I developed a slightly unhealthy obsession with fashion, which again continues to this day. And had two siblings, just had a good time hanging out with them.
Yeah, and a Melbourneian.
I'm a Melbourneian.
Okay. Yeah. Obviously, the AFL gave that away. But,
absolutely.
Born and raised. All right. Three other ice-breaking questions for you. What did you want to be when you were in school?
So when I was in primary school, what I wanted to be was the first woman to land on the moon.
I haven't had that answer yet.
No, well, there you go. And those hopes were dashed, firstly because I discovered, again, quite early on that I hate roller coasters. Yeah. They make me both terrified and motion sick. Yeah. So I was like, well, that is not going to work with a career of flying. And then somebody else did it. So, it was already done. So then I had to find a different pathway to be some remarkable woman somehow.
There we go. If you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
And so right at this moment, I'm going to continue the Melbourneian and Hawthorn Football Club theme. And so I'm really fascinated by our current coach, a guy called Sam Mitchell, past player. Yeah. I just really like the way I see him engage with the media, the leadership that he's showing in the team. And I always like to engage with other leaders in really different environments to kind of pick their brains about how they think about what they're trying to achieve and how that kind of comes through and how they work with their teams. And so he's my current pick. Yeah, I want to have dinner with Sam Mitchell.
What's one thing most people don't know about you?
So my answer to this is a little bit disingenuous because I always use it to answer this question. So a lot of people know this now. But anyway, for what it's worth, I did love athletics growing up. That was my sport right through my 20s. I was a sprinter. I liked the slightly longer sprints because I had hamstring problems, which is always a challenge for a 100-metre runner. And I was competing at about the same time that Kathy Freeman was emerging in her international career. She also was at that time based in Melbourne. Yeah. And she would run interclub and state championships as part of her training schedule, right? So she was already kind of in the Commonwealth Games and sort of destined for these huge things. I'm just thinking this week about the 25th anniversary of the 2000 Sydney Olympics.
Didn't seem that long ago.
Yeah, I know. So I've competed against Kathy Freeman, or should I say we were in the same race and started at the same time. Okay. And then it was kind of like all over Red Rover. I just kind of look up. She's already halfway around the bend and I'm going, I'm running as fast as I can. Yeah. I feel like I'm going up and down on the spot.
So far on this podcast, I've had a diverse group of people with differing backgrounds, and that's a really big part of this podcast. So I've had an accountant, a lawyer, a footballer, a marketer, 2 engineers, an ecologist, a farmer, and even a high school dropout, all of who have gone on to become executives within the energy industry. So you initially studied law. Why law originally, and how has that background shaped your career and the way you think about the energy sector?
That's a very eclectic mix, which is one of the things I love about the energy sector. So I'll go back and answer your question now. So I was actually originally a math science student at high school, actually all the way through to year 12. They were my best subjects. I had this amazing English teacher in year 11, Mrs. Shaw, who had been an actress in London's West End. Suffered some quite serious health issues, which had brought her to Australia to teaching. She was so inspiring that I kind of went, maybe this kind of English, like working with language, I'm interested in that too. So I added English literature into my mix of my final year studies. And then I was very undecided as to what I wanted to do when I was coming out of school. But because I did quite well with my results, I had elderly relatives sent in to, talk me into going to university and finding some sort of course. So I kind of hunted around the handbook and I thought, I could do law. That's a kind of like a pretty basic start to getting into some sort of business. Yeah. And all I had really was this, going back to the fashion obsession, image of myself in my head wearing a nice suit and a lovely pair of high-heeled shoes. Okay. And I thought, that's a direction. So I started out, I did my law degree. In fact, I started out in a funny direction, which was doing it without a second degree, which was like everyone kind of did 2 degrees. And then after the first year, I realised I needed my second degree. So I picked up a commerce degree as well. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My boyfriend's best friend was going to this firm called Arthur Robbs. I'm like, I'll try and go there. Yeah. Even when I started, I didn't like it that much. So it kind of took me a while to get into it. Yeah. And then I ended up staying for a really long time. Yeah.
Sorry, and we'll get to the second part of that question in a sec. Yeah. I interviewed Andy Evans earlier, and he's a lawyer by trade as well. And he was saying it was LA Law on the TV show that inspired him. I think it's Corbin Burtz, and that he said, okay. So it's funny how the different things influence where your career journeys end up. So.
It is funny because now I kind of look back and I'm more sort of into that, the more traditional legal courtroom drama, like, the To Kill a Mockingbird or the 12 Good Men, that kind of stuff. Yeah, okay. But not at the time. At the time, it was just like, it seems like an interesting thing to do.
So how has that law background helped you in terms of your thinking now of where you are in the energy sector?
So in my legal career, I had quite an unusual practice in that, generally speaking, you come up through a law firm like that and you develop an area of specialisation which is based on your legal skills. Yeah. So you'll be a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, or you'll be a tax lawyer, or you'll be a litigation lawyer, and you apply your specialised legal skills to any sector because they're, it's the same skills transferable. My legal career, I was an expert in the energy sector. Yeah. And then I would apply it across the board to a whole bunch of different legal disciplines. So I did M&A for energy companies. I did privatisations for governments and energy companies. I did project development, lots of project development, wind farms, solar farms. I did regulatory reform, advising governments. I did compliance and enforcement. But I was always in and around the energy sector. So I saw it from a lot of angles.
Yeah, okay.
And then in each of those different roles, you would be working with the different experts, the engineers or the economists or the merchant bankers when we're trying to sell things. So you would get all of their take on it as well. And so what I really like about it is the opportunity to see and learn a whole bunch of different ways of thinking about the world and bringing that together.
Yeah.
So I find that experience that I had through my legal career is really stands me in good stead for what I'm doing now.
So when we caught up to prep for the podcast, you told me your story of how you joined Allens and ended up in energy.
Yes.
So you had two other industries that maybe you could have been a specialist in, which would have been very different to where you ended up. Can you run us through that sort of story in terms of your initial start within your career there at Allens?
Yeah.
And then when you went into energy, how did that play out? And what were sort of some of the really interesting projects that you were working on? Because it must have been a fascinating time in the energy transition.
Yeah, so this is like back in the 90s.
Yeah, well,
it's a long time ago in the energy transition. But it was, it actually a starting point of it all. So, so similar to my very considered and planned direction to get into law in the first place and sort of ending up at what was called Arthur Robbs then. Most law firms do this with their junior lawyers. They rotate you between a number of these practice areas so that you can work out which one you like the best. And I was doing my time in litigation, which I did really like. It's really interesting. So it's still in my mind, going back to the comment about the courtroom drama, that's the pure law at work. And so I was sort of headed down this path of, developing into more of a litigation lawyer, maybe going to the bar. And this fabulous partner at the firm at the time, a fellow called Graham Johnson, he goes, Anna, why don't you just come and give the commercial practice a go? Just come and see what you like. And then as a bit of an inducement, Graham at the time was the relationship partner for the Australian Cricket Board. So sports nut, cricket would just add to the football and the athletics stories. What was happening at the time was that tobacco sponsorship was, or advertising was being made illegal. Yeah. And so the ACB had to find new sponsors. And so I got to write up the brand new sponsorship agreements, which at the time were hilariously Ansett, don't exist anymore. Yep. They did the tests. Carlton United Breweries did the one-day matches. And because I was, the legal advisor, we went and were in the inner sanctum at the Melbourne Boxing Day tests, sitting with all the players' wives, etc. And I was worried because I had the wrong sunglasses. But so that was like my first kind of opportunity within the commercial area. And then Graham also acted for Philip Morris. So, cap rank rule, law firms act for any client. So obviously sort of long water under the bridge since then. But they needed a secondee, which again is a very typical thing that law firms do, and it's a great way for young lawyers to get a different experience as you go out and you act as the in-house lawyer sitting in with the client. Yeah. And so I was sent off to Philip Morris, didn't have an office in the CBD in those days, so it's in Moorabbin. Yeah. I didn't have a car. And Graham went, no problem. We'll organise through Philip Morris for you to have a company car. So still one of the nicest cars I've ever driven. That's probably a slight exaggeration. But that was a really important experience for me, being out, with where the factory is. So head office was with the factory, advising the guy on the factory floor who's busy acquiring a new palletizing machine, who wants to understand, quite rightly, what every clause in this agreement that I've drafted means, going right through the boilerplate. Yeah. And so one of the things that I got good at was translating complex concepts to something that someone who's, very good at something else, but not a lawyer, would understand. Yeah. And I think that's been like a really pivotal skill that I learnt, not the hard way, because there's lovely people and, it was really fun, interesting work, but it was a really important skill to learn to actually get done what I needed to get done.
But I think understanding the operations is all well and good to sit in a head office if you're at a engineering business or whatever. But I think going to the factory floor and understanding that, and I was going to say, I talk to people all the day, all the time in recruitment. Some people can, I always sort of say that, be that chameleon of being able to present to a board or be able to throw a high-vis steel caps and go to an operational site. I think it's something people should always have exposure to. But early on in your career, that would have, as you said, great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then my story from there is I came back from secondment. Because I'd been on secondment, I had no work. Yeah. And so it's kind of the lawyers dreaded, you put capacity on your timesheet. Yeah. And nobody likes young lawyers who have capacity. So the next person who walks in your office, you're getting that job. And it was just lucky. The next person who walked in my office was actually one of my peers, another lawyer at my level, who was running this great big due diligence exercise for the first privatisation that the government was running of the energy assets. So Victoria government sold off their energy assets in the mid-90s. And we were acting for one of the bidders. And so you have to do this exercise where you review all these documents, which, by the way, in those days, nowadays data rooms are all online things. In those days, it was a physical room that you would have to go to and sit in there. And they were secret because the bidders weren't supposed to know who each other was for competitive tension. So there's this whole kind of like, cloak and dagger thing about it, which was pretty, fun for a junior lawyer. You've got to go off to this secret data room and sit there and read documents. Anyway, so the job that I got was reviewing all of these brand new regulatory instruments which had been put in place in anticipation of, privatising this essential service, basically. The energy-specific contracts that had been drafted to support the business and, summarise them and advise the client, who was spending upwards of $5 billion, of what I thought they meant for the business going forward.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. Like, it was so great. It was so
probably sounds good. The capacity was put on your profile. You could be still in Marabba and in tobacco. You could be in cricket. I know that's a love. But,
it's just that kind of thing of taking advantage of the opportunity that's before you, because you never know. Yeah. Like, I would have never thought, wow, I think energy is really interesting. I just went, okay, I have to do this piece of work. And then I went, this is really good.
Yeah.
And so then the next step was after the VIX did all their privatisation. So I just then acted on each one because the firm would get a client every time. Then the firm got the role advising the South Australian government, so being on the sell side.
Yep.
And so I was sort of an integral part of that team, even though I was only just a senior associate. Mm. And so having this was the thing, sort of being young and female, because it was new, I always knew I knew as much as everybody else.
Yeah.
So I just had this sort of, confidence that would have been a lot harder to build in something really long and established, like competition law or M&A or something like that. So it was just, there was this great combination of, I literally found it really fascinating. It gave me this kind of a bit of an edge to overcome some of my, things that might otherwise have been harder to overcome in my career. Mm. And, I've been doing it to this day.
There you go. Yeah. I love every time you talk about the energy industry, you've got a big smile on your face. So sounds like you obviously ended up in the right area. At Allens, you pioneered a number of diversity and inclusion programs well before this became as widely prioritised as it is today. What was it like being a woman in the energy industry? Because I would imagine it would have been interesting. I'll use the word interesting. And what were some of the proudest successes that you had in running some of these DE&I programs that you were doing at that time?
Yeah, so being a woman in the law itself a challenge. So notwithstanding, even at that time, you would have similar number of law students coming in. So my articles clerk, which is like your grade year cohort, we were probably 50-50. Mm-hmm. But you would find quite quickly as you moved up the ranks in a law firm that would thin out. Yeah. And so when I started, I think the firm had 2 female partners. When I got made a partner in 2001, I think we were 17%. And to my great pride, they announced, I think last year, that they had got to 40%. So the ambition of the 40-40-20 was achieved through an enormous amount of hard work. Mm. I guess I kind of answered a little bit before, being the youngest and most female person in so many rooms. Mm. You started to kind of like just not even notice it because that was just normal. And so the thing that I find hard now is to clock that I'm not that anymore. Yeah. And often I'm in a room where I'm the most senior of a number of wonderful females there. Yeah. And that they're kind of looking to me because I'm the most senior. I find it very hard to kind of like latch onto that idea. But some of the things that we did that I was really proud of, one was around sort of really diving in to understand what was driving the drop off. So it's very easy to say, in law firm, you kind of get to this senior associate, which is an important promotion point on the way to partner, at about the same time as women are having children. Mm. And you can't change the fact that women have to have children. And so it's just too hard. Yeah. Like we can't, it's just a kind of a unfortunate thing that means women can't progress. Mm. And I mean, interestingly, my husband has been a stay-at-home dad since our kids were born. So I don't buy into that at all because I didn't have that challenge. I had, my 6-month maternity leave with each of my wonderful children. And then I went back to work in the same way that I had worked before, but I still faced challenges trying to progress. So I'm going, there's definitely something more here. So I did this piece of work where we looked at the way we ranked performance for our junior lawyers. And we found this really interesting insight, which is that the very first year, generally speaking, the women outperformed the men. And then at about second year, it flipped and the men would be outperforming the women. And so just applying this kind of gender lens to what we were doing with our, everyone honestly applying the performance criteria. Well, why is that happening?
Yeah.
And so it helped really reveal with no malintent, unconscious bias that was seeping through just because we had a majority of male partners, that they would tend to work with people who were more like them, that perhaps some of the skills that you need as a lawyer came more naturally, vast sweeping generalisation, to women in the early years and then men as you sort of started to progress. So you move from being the real skill that you love in a junior lawyer is someone who's really detail focused, really accurate, obviously works hard, that across the board, but would kind of get you a piece of work when you needed it that would be really beautifully executed, to needing some of these broader skills around negotiation and sort of having to, front for your client in a meeting and those kind of things. And you just sort of, because of the environment, or maybe it was because the men were handing out the work that was more challenging to people who were like them, with, again, no malintent. And so because we'd done this piece of research, we had some good data, then we could start to address it. And that's really, I think, what makes the difference when first of all, you decide you want to achieve something, which the firm did, so to its credit, and then you actually work out, what will make a difference. The other thing that I'm really proud of, which is more of a personal thing, is that throughout my career at Allens and still now, and as you pointed out, I have a big smile on my face when I talk about the industry. I just love it.
You really do.
And I've had so many junior lawyers come through my team. So there's still basically an apprentice system at law firms where you have what used to be called an article clerk, which is now a graduate allocated to a partner, and then there's a kind of like a pyramid that report into you. So many people, particularly young women who I've inspired to work in the energy sector. And I'm proud of the ones who made partner at Allens, but I'm also really proud of the ones who've gone out into industry and doing awesome things. And I kind of, if I think about anything that I've left a legacy of when I finish my career, which is hopefully not for quite some time yet, that will be like actually my most proud thing, is that I've sort of been able to, in some small way, inspire people to do amazing things in their own career, particularly young women.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at today, in your mind, what does the energy industry need to do to achieve greater diversity across the board? And are there specific things companies should be focusing on in your mind?
So again, I think this idea that companies need to self-diagnose is really important. So I've got this nice honorary role, which is I am one of the Australian ambassadors to the Global Equality in Energy Transitions Initiative. It's quite a mouthful.
Yes.
It was set up between the International Energy Agency and something called the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is a collection of, as the name suggests, clean energy ministers from jurisdictions who choose to participate, which is looking at this exact question, like we want to get more women into the energy sector. And so they have a number of work programs, one of which is the ambassador program. And so jurisdictions nominate ambassadors. It's a fairly ambiguous role. It's kind of like do what you would like to do. It's kind of like being a role model, being an advocate. But I did also choose to really focus on sort of that educational space and think, as much of the work that is being done broadly to get more women or girls into STEM careers, here is another really great example of a STEM career. So, we've been connecting with a bunch of really interesting organisations who've been working in this space for a long time, but have perhaps been more focused in technology or health or engineering more generally. And we kind of go, clean energy is something that people in that generation are very passionate about, or the transition to net zero. Here's another way to encourage and inspire girls to think about, if they've got talents in maths and science and engineering, to get involved. Of course, there's no point getting them involved unless you then have great careers to offer them. And so what I think about the energy companies is the different ways that they can get women involved and the different things they need to think about both go in threes. So, what we need at the moment is we just need more human beings, because there's so much to do. There's so much to build. Yep. And the areas where we really need people, power system engineers, there's like a global shortage. The trades.
Yep.
And these are areas where women are like massively underrepresented.
Yeah.
So if you could actually make your workplace attractive, then there's a kind of like a bit of a low-hanging fruit, I think, to actually get the workforce that we need to get stuff done.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Powering Your Career. Clicking follow or subscribe will allow you to stay up to date with all future content. Leaving a review helps others find this podcast. And for more information on West Recruitment and how we can help, please visit us at westrecruitment.com.au.
Then we have the other things that we need in the energy sector, which actually I think women are excelling in other sectors. Right. So, you know, one of the things that, I can't remember who observed this to me, but the CEOs of both of our big supermarket chains are now women because they're good at customer service and that's the path that they would have come up to their roles through. And that's what we need in the energy sector. So kind of tapping into skills that women are more traditionally represented in the workforce in is going to be critical. And then the diversity itself, like solving all these complex problems, just having diversity of thought is something that's essential actually to work out how we move forward. And so to get more women in and make your workplace more attractive, again, this is my 3 for that. First of all, it's the basics of safety, like eliminate harassment and discrimination, because sadly, like I still hear terrible stories about young electricians. Women make up 6% of electricians, which is ridiculous. Yeah. And, you know, I've met some fabulous young women sort of who are representing their profession talk about what they experience on the work site. You know, they don't have the right gear, they don't have the right bathrooms, they don't, you know, they have blokes telling them that they are stealing a man's job. You know, like we're in the 2020s. So that's got to be the fundamental starting point. And then I think you've got going back to so I was a little bit dismissive before about the fact that women having children is something that's a challenge to overcome, because obviously it is. Women in society are traditional caregivers, whether it's your children or your parents, or and that is something that you're trying to navigate. And so I think society is slowly getting better at that. And actually something companies that can do to help is have family-friendly policies that are gender neutral. So encourage more men to take parental leave. And then you normalise it. And then your whole career path is not dependent on what did you choose to do parental leave and how did you work around it. It's just part of going forward. And then I think the third thing is coming back to my observations before is this idea of merit. So your unconscious bias, what does good look like? How are you taking that in when you're considering promotions and pay and hiring and creating psychological safety in the workplace? So there's my 2 sets of 3s for you.
So moving on in terms of your current role.
Yeah.
So you're now the executive chair of the AEMC. For those who don't know, can you please explain your role, what the AEMC does, and how does it differ from, and I suppose work alongside the other regulatory bodies like the AER and AEMO?
Yeah. So sometimes we get called the alphabet soup. So
it's the why.
Yeah, you can see why. I know. It's just to add to the complexity of the industry. And I find it easiest to explain us by starting off explaining them.
Yep.
Australian Energy Market Operator, as the name suggests, they operate the system and they operate the market. The Australian Energy Regulator is responsible for regulating, compliance and enforcement, and prices, both networks, which are the natural monopolies. They regulate those prices. They also provide a safety net of retail prices. Our job at the Australian Energy Market Commission is that we set the rules that the operator operates by and that the regulator enforces. One of the really interesting things about energy markets, and this is the case all over the world, is that they are not naturally forming markets. They use common infrastructure, which is economically efficient and just makes good practical sense. And the product is homogenous. So all energy markets are defined, like what are the rules for how you connect up to that common infrastructure and how you buy and sell your product. And so we set that. And so when you think about what we then do is we're actually providing the parameters in which industry participates and creates their business. And so it's actually more exciting than simply setting rules.
Yes.
It's actually creating a framework for a whole industry to operate. And of course, as you can imagine, the rules originally were set out in the 1990s when I was doing that privatisation work. And as much as they said, oh, these are technology neutral, they weren't technology neutral. They just described what happened at the time when what we had was a small number of very large synchronous or fossil fuel power stations. Yeah. And now what we've moved to is the complete opposite. We have a very large number of small intermittent power stations bolstered by our, battery storage, our pumped hydro, our gas peakers, connected by more and more complex transmission and distribution network operations. And so we're trying to get the rules from here to here. Yeah. Sort of one step at a time.
With everything else happening in the market, I can only imagine the challenge of doing that. Yeah. And that leads perfectly because, and that's what I wanted to ask, what are the big focuses for the AEMC right now? And you probably mentioned one of the challenges, but I would imagine there's a whole lot. What are some of the challenges you're working through as an organisation at the moment?
Yeah. So we took a step back last year, actually, which was to do a piece of work which was unusual for us, which was to try and go, because we do just look at what's on our plate now, like everybody else, look forward to 2050. And we developed a strategic narrative to help guide our thinking over where we needed to spend our time, because there's always more to do than there is time to do it. And that has become a bit of a North Star that we look at. We came up with 8 challenges and opportunities that we thought would be prevailing themes over the next 25 years as we work towards 2050. And so within that, then we do set annual priorities. Yeah. So our current annual priorities are customers and consumer energy resources, by which I mean predominantly solar panels, home batteries, electric vehicles, other sort of home energy management systems that help you respond to price signals and save money on your energy bills. Second one is gas. So the gas transition is really critical. It's really complex. And I think what we have right now is an opportunity to do it better than we did the coal transition. Yeah. And I think it's more complex than the coal transition because we have this situation where we both need gas now. Yeah. We don't really know what's going to replace gas, but at the same time, demand for certain uses of gas is already declining. Yeah. So sort of balancing this quite complex set of issues. The third area is future market design. Yep. So sort of evolving our market gradually so that it meets this very different set of assets from where it's come from. And the last area is network regulation, which is those natural monopoly parts of the supply chain, which again have come from a fairly stable, simple is the wrong word because nothing's simple about it, but easy to describe business model. Like they were just delivering electricity from point A to point B, but now in each case, sort of the high voltage, which we call transmission, the low voltage, which we call distribution, are doing a lot more things to make the new system work. And so working out whether the way we regulate them is still appropriate for this future world is that's our first priority. Yeah.
In your previous answer, you talked about other countries or the globe, and obviously the energy transitions influence everyone, and it's a global thing we're all going through. Other countries are also wrestling with the complexities of the energy transition. Are there international examples of reform or market design that you think Australia should be paying really close attention to or perhaps avoiding?
I've had the great fortune actually over the last couple of years. When I started, it was just after COVID, so it was my international exposure was limited and it was virtual. So more recently, I've had a chance to engage with counterparts in other jurisdictions, which is so illuminating. So the first thing to just observe is in some areas, we are world leading. The International Energy Agency, I think it was last year, they put out a report that looked at how countries were adapting to integrate variable renewables, so that's your sun and wind, into their grid, and they ranked people on a scale of 1 to 5, and 5 being the most advanced. And so I think Australia as a whole was a 3. South Australia is a 4, right? So South Australia, having gone sort of from coal and gas all the way to some days they can power the whole demand in the state from rooftop solar, is an absolute world leader. And so I was having this conversation with colleagues in California where they're like, oh, we've got so much rooftop solar. We've got like 2 million households out of a population of 40 million people. And I'm like, that's nothing.
Yeah.
We've got 4 million households out of a population of 27 million people. And we are doing all this really interesting work about how to better integrate that so that it delivers benefits, not just for the people who bought the solar panels, absolutely critical, but for everybody.
Yeah.
And so the way that we were thinking about demand side participation was way more developed than where they were at.
Yeah.
On the other hand, same conference, one of the bigger areas of debate at the moment or discussion is data centers.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, huge economic opportunities, going to power AI. There are both good things and terrifying things about AI, but we've got to grapple with it basically. From an energy perspective, huge energy use, a real challenge. Like we're kind of already challenged to replace our retiring assets and deal with household and business electrification. Like that was going to make the grid 2-3 times bigger. And now we've got data centers coming into the mix. Ireland was a really interesting. We spoke to the Irish regulator because their government had been really encouraging of, the big techs bringing the data centers to Ireland, economic opportunity. But it got to the point where the energy sector was just paralysed. It was unable to actually meet the demand. And so they've had to say, we can't have any more for the time being. And so they're trying to work out a regulatory framework to both embrace the opportunity but manage the challenges of this whole new demand source. So they're just absolutely interesting things to learn by looking all over the world. I was at another event a couple of weeks ago where I was engaging more with regulators in our region. So I was on a panel talking about regulatory challenges with a regulator from Thailand and a regulator from Malaysia. And I started off thinking, I'm not going to have anything in common with these two other regulators. It's such a different economy. It's such a different industry that they're working with. Exactly the same challenges. Yeah. So decision-making under uncertainty. How do you balance progress and perfection? Yeah. How do you make these challenging trade-offs between, you've got to balance up your affordability, your reliability, your emissions goals. We're all dealing with the same thing. Yeah. And so it's actually a nice kind of, cohort to be in. Going,
it's good to be talking to other and realising other people are having the same challenges and difficulties as we have or are having. So the energy transition is obviously crucial to our future. In your view, what does the Australian energy industry need to get right to make sure the transition is a success? What are the biggest risks or missteps we need to avoid? And how do you think we're tracking against our goals?
So I'm going to just refer back to our strategic narrative that I spoke about earlier, because it did have some of the obvious things in it, like one of my favourite, the changing out the engine of the aeroplane while you're flying it.
Yeah.
But some of the other things that we think are so important is social licence. And I mean that in the biggest possible sense. So social licence is really critical and had a lot of attention and good work being done in relation to regional communities having new infrastructure built in their community. And it was, not being managed well by some of the energy companies. And now it's had a lot of attention and it's a really important area. But social licence in its biggest sense, while we feel like where the Australian public is at anyway is largely, yes, we see there's climate change and we need to address it. You still need to bring them along on, and this is what it means for your day-to-day, energy supply. Like most human beings would like to not think about that. They would just like it to sort of happen that you swap this out for this and my life continues uninterrupted, which it should. So this kind of social licence, and then the other one I think is equity. So the potential for the energy transition to disproportionately benefit some customers and disadvantage others is real. We did a piece of work at the end of last year, which we're going to do annually, which is looking out over a 10-year horizon and saying what are the trends in end-use electricity prices and what are the biggest factors that will influence that. And so it's meant to help inform policy and say, if you really want to have bang for your buck, focus in on this one because that'll make the biggest impact to price. One of the things that we put together with that was we went, well, for customers, the electricity price per kilowatt hour is interesting, but actually not really at the end of the day, you want to know what's going out of your wallet. And so we thought about this idea of an energy wallet, which is your electricity, gas and petrol prices. How much does a household pay? And through the transition to net zero and electrification, how much can people save? And we show that actually you can make enormous savings, like upwards of 70%. If you can get the solar panels, if you can electrify gas appliances, if you can get an EV, and if you charge it in a smart way. So that's great for the people who are able to do all of that. But what it means is that for the people who can't, there's this real risk of getting left further behind. And that's just not an acceptable outcome. So this phrase gets used in a lot of different senses, but everyone's got to come along on the journey and be benefit from the transition to net zero. And so focusing attention on how do you make sure that happens, I think is the other really important part, which is it's a combined effort. So that's not just the energy companies, that's us, that's government, that's kind of as a sector, how we actually achieve our emissions goals while making sure that customers, like no one's left behind. That's the phrase I was looking for before.
We'll say how your face lights up when we talk about the energy industry. So I'm looking forward to asking you this next question. What do you personally love about working in the energy industry, and why should others consider joining us?
So what I love about it right now is this huge opportunity to make a difference. So the energy transition is, in my view, underpins addressing climate change. It's the foundation for this global economic transformation that has to happen, and we get to contribute to that. So what an amazing time to be able to use what I often think of as my somewhat eclectic set of skills, and other people have their own different set of skills, but to make a difference in like basically this kind of like huge endeavor. So that's my kind of my headline of what's in it right now. Having said that, I've been in love with the energy industry since the mid-90s, and there's something about it. It's so real. Like it affects everybody who turns on their light, and then all businesses, and sort of this, again, contribution to the economy. So it's very tangible. But the other thing that I mentioned a little bit earlier is the real diverse mix of skills and interests that go into actually understanding it or making it work. So one of the jobs that I did back when we were doing that South Australian privatisation, when I was the young female senior associate, was leading a piece of work on a regulatory instrument that was to stabilise prices from the transition of government ownership to private ownership. And so, my job was to hold the pen and write this instrument, which was of itself novel. I think there'd been one written before for the big privatisations. And I'm in a room with the accountants, the economists, the people looking after vulnerable customers, the merchant bankers trying to maximise sale proceeds, and everybody's got a point of view, and trying to understand enough about all of those point of view to write down what makes sense, and trying to navigate the different interests and get to an outcome. I really love that. So it's just something around the inherent, and I don't know if this is peculiar to the energy sector or not, because this is just the place that I play, but there's something about that need for diversity, the need for kind of a broad understanding and bringing it together that I find really, really engaging.
And it's good, because my next question was going to be, what skills do you think people need to be successful in the energy transition? I think one of those ones is, I think, as you said a moment ago, the ability that if you are a lawyer, that you can transcend what you do, and that you can engage. If you're a lawyer, engage with the accountant or the engineer or the operations team. But what do you think? What skills should people be developing to have a successful career in the energy industry, do you think, over the next few years?
I kind of anticipated this a little bit earlier tonight. So there's the core skills. Like, as I said, there is literally a worldwide power system engineer shortage. So there's going to be these absolutely fundamental technical skills. But if I think about where we're going, and this is not Robinson Crusoe as a sector, it's the innovation skills. It's the ability to listen and learn and actually pivot to something different. So, technology, we talked about data centers and AI, that is going to be a huge part of how energy, not in the far distant future, gets, made more. What should happen is that the complexity happens behind the scenes, and that the technology helps us with that. And then the customer gets this sort of seamless, easy to understand, but much better product. And that only happens when you're actually open to new ideas, and can incorporate those new ideas. So one of the other things I did at Allen's was I was the head of innovation for a period of time. And what I use, law firms are hierarchical places that depend on precedent. And so trying to innovate in a law firm is quite hard. But your best ideas are going to come from your junior lawyers. First of all, because they haven't had the burden of we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Everything's new to them. And they're going, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And then second of all, there's just said, each new generation is more au fait with the technology that's available that they've grown up with. And so they're more able to go, well, this is what this technology can do. And perhaps also more able to think into the future of what new technologies can do. So I think it's that innovation and open-mindedness that's going to be critical.
Absolutely. Lastly, but certainly not least, mental health and wellness. So life feels, and I'll speak for myself, I presume in your role you would agree, but life feels like it's only getting busier with more and more pressure on us while we're juggling careers, kids, sport, exercise, all the other things. Firstly, do you agree with that sort of sentiment? I would imagine you're smiling. Yeah, okay. Personally, how do you manage it all while looking after your own mental health and well-being? And how do you find balance with everything you've got on your plate?
So the basics, the exercise, sleep well, eat well, which is easier said than done.
Yeah.
I quite like exercise, going back to the athletics. So I kind of run, and that's not a.
You put it in your diary. How do you make sure that happens each week?
I do it in the morning before the day starts.
Okay,
Yeah. So that was actually some advice given to me when I started at the law firm, which is once you get into the office, your day gets taken up by demands of others. So do you first thing in the morning. So I do that. My family is so critical to me. As I said, my husband has been a stay-at-home dad since our kids, who are now 18 and 20, were born. That has given me enormous freedom because just in terms of the balance of who does the stuff in the household, but also, they're just a source of enormous joy. Like far and away, my kids are the best thing in my life. My daughter and I have bonded over the Hawthorn Football Club. So the two of us travelled to the finals over the last couple of weeks. There's nothing more releasing than standing up and screaming, ball, yes, when the free kick is either awarded or not awarded.
With 85,000
85,000 of your closest friends. And then the other one, which I came back to sort of more recently, was music. So as I said, in my childhood and teenage years, I learned actually the piano and the flute. I always wanted to learn singing, but I didn't. And so when, as a sort of a 12-year-old, my daughter insisted on having singing lessons and then decided quite promptly that she didn't like them. I went to the teacher who was sort of local to us, and we'd met her through the dance school, and said, do you ever teach adults? And she goes, absolutely, all the time. And so I started doing singing lessons, and I was so bad. And one of the other nerdy things about me is I just like getting better at things. Like I like that process of learning somewhat intellectually about it, doing the practice. But it is such a joy. And there's a little bit of the discipline about it. Like, well, because I've got to turn up to a lesson on Saturday, I better do some practice during the week. And then when I go down and sit at my piano and have a bit of a sing, and I do all the funny exercises and stuff, it actually releases my mind from everything.
Yeah, like in terms of belting it out, or
if I want to belt out I Will Survive or Let It Go.
Okay.
That's not a bad end to my day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've asked this question in the past to a podcast guest, and get the song that they chose, but that would be the song that you belt out. Like, well, I won't ask you to give you a demonstration now. That would be a first for the podcast, but I won't ask you that. Yeah, but and that's the thing. I think it's finding that passion and doing something that.
You know what's really interesting is doing something that you don't have to be good at and that you're not trying to make money from, but you can still put your heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
And I think we don't do enough of that.
No. And I think to your point, it's finding the time for yourself.
Yes.
For me, it's swimming. It's when my mobile phone's not with me. No one can contact me, and I'm chasing that black line up and down a pool, and it's David Smith time, and I can sort of have my own thoughts. And it's great. You singing and well, Anna, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
So have I.
Time goes really quick.
Yeah.
You sort of lose yourself in terms of these chats, but I've really enjoyed it. I've really appreciated our time, and thank you so much for sharing, your thoughts, your experience, and perspective. I've loved it.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
If you have enjoyed the podcast, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, share. Anna, thanks again for being part of this.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Powering Your Career with David Smith. Join me next time as we talk to energy leaders to provide you valuable perspectives on career development, leadership, navigating the energy transition, and strategies for managing mental health and wellness in a high-pressure industry. If you are enjoying this series, please click follow or subscribe for further episodes. And leaving a review or a comment helps others find this podcast. Also, if our team can assist you with any recruitment requirements or you are keen to discuss your career journey, please reach out to West Energy or West Recruitment at westrecruitment.com.au. Thanks.